So let's take a look at this. Readiness for change. Definition, therefore, readiness means being prepared in its simplistic term. Change readiness can be defined as three key things here: having the right conditions and resources in place to support the change processes. So do we have, if you look at the context within the organization, internally and externally, do we have the conditions conducive to actually achieve the change required by our project? And do we have the adequate resources to support that change? So fair enough. Secondly, having a clear vision and objectives for the intended change. This is always a priority and should always be addressed. Not only do we have a vision and things like clearly defined scope, clear objectives, clear deliverables, but those things need to be linked back to higher level business objectives, goals, and high level perhaps KPIs, key performance indicators by the organization. We need congruency across all of those, and it needs to be continuously reassessed that we still have alignment. Thirdly, having the motivation and attitudes to engage with the change and making it work. Now, this is tapping into an entirely different area. This is where we start looking at the organization as a living being. We look at the people that are in the organization. We want to look at whether they're engaged with the organization, whether there's healthy relationships, whether we have good team dynamics, whether people are motivated by their work day to day as well as with our proposed project, and try to gauge that somehow. And we also want to look at things like their attitude, and what makes up their attitude, things like their behaviors, their day-to-day actions that are a result of what they think and believe, and they all link together. And if there's a disconnect on some level between what people say and what they do and the results of their actions, then there's often a problem. There's a breakdown somewhere, and that breakdown will result in issues and concerns and potential risks on our project moving forward. So, purpose of assessing the readiness for change. First of all, to analyze the preparedness of the conditions, attitudes, and resources, as we've already mentioned, in order to facilitate a successful project ultimately, right? I mean, that's our ultimate high-end goal. The next thing is the understanding or the appreciation that the greater the complexity of a proposed change or proposed project or initiative, the greater the importance of understanding where in the organization there is readiness for change, where there isn't readiness, and if there are any key points within the organization where there's a breakdown, it could cause a bottleneck, it could cause an issue, or it could cause an extreme risk to the initiative being successful. So we need to look at the organization holistically, and we need to spend time and enough time planning that's commensurate with the complexity of the proposed change. Thirdly, it's imperative again to have a clear vision and to have congruency across our plans. So we've already said that. That's good. We want to make sure it's consistent though. Now, some other things to consider. Important that we get key stakeholders to understand that we are dealing with a whole system, not just individual pieces. Some key reasons here: if you embark on a significant development change initiative without assessing readiness, at best you risk wasting opportunities and resources, but at worst, and this is the concern, if you don't show due diligence on this level, you risk exposing the organization to some major issues, which could be debilitating to the organization. Secondly, the interrelatedness of all parts in a functioning system means that even though many pieces of the organization may be ready for change, it only takes one specific discrete element or people group or department to have an issue with the change to become the bottleneck or the main blockage of a change initiative being successful in the end. So every part of the organization is important, and assessing readiness across the organization as an enterprise is essential for us to be successful. So, rethinking readiness for change then. Now, when you discuss readiness for change, or change management in general at an organizational level, many people react to that negatively and think, oh, all you're talking about here is imposing change upon us, and that it's a frustrating thing. But the reality is, in many cases, it's not just about imposing change. Yes, we are trying to create a change. But to be successful, we don't just need to create or facilitate some type of change management intervention. In many cases, change and projects in general are successful because of what the organization already does well. And we need to leverage those key things. So, for example, does an organization already have healthy relationships within each functional area? Have they figured out a way to work across the functional areas of an organization enterprise-wide? Do they have healthy leadership in the organization and buy-in at all levels? Do they have autonomy, across different areas of the organization, that people feel like they have control over their work, they have an effective amount of authority to make decisions, and they're fully engaged? Do they also have alignment between performance management, so all the HR stuff, the metrics that are being used, the reporting that's being done, and the goals and objectives that have been set for individuals, for teams, for departments, and for functional areas of the organization? Now, if all of these things are healthy, we tend to have a higher success rate of any project to begin with. So our goal here for a readiness or preparedness for change is to often leverage those key things that already exist. So a healthy organization united to work together to achieve the efforts that we've planned out. It can also be about the ability to make or to manage the change. So does the organization already have key processes in place, mature processes? Do they already have our soft capacities that we mentioned: communication skills, flexibility, responsiveness, the ability to plan, strategic thinking, problem solving, all the above? The lack of the right conditions often create what we call blocks to capacity creation, or bottlenecks within the organization. So we would want to identify, are there any key areas within the organization or the organization's processes or the way the organization is structured that create these bottlenecks or blockages? And let's move on to the next level. So getting started then. The starting point for any assessment is identified by first of all, the scope, right? The scope of several key things in particular. The scope of the capacity development initiative, and the scope of the actual proposed planned change, that future state that we're trying to create. We need clearly defined scope combined with an HR strategy. So instead of just having the scope of the project, we also need to consider what additional requirements need to be defined around the scope to enable the scope to actually come to fruition. So do we need temporary scope, for example? Do we need some infrastructure to actually help implement the project that we can remove after the project's implemented up and running? And then we need to work with HR, because HR is the typical owner of everybody's roles and responsibilities, performance management stuff that links what we do day to day. And some of these things often need to be rewritten for the change initiative or for our project in general and moving forward. So an assessment of the scope should include both scope of the project as well as an assessment of the impact to the capacity of the organization. And we need to consider whether HR needs to be fully engaged with redefining some of these things. So let's move on then. Steps to readiness. Some key areas to consider here. Now, what often happens is we're expected to simply, create some planning at the tail end of the project, but what we want to do is engage the planning for readiness as early on as possible. And we want to get people to change their mindset about change to begin with. So the common approach or the common reaction to any proposed change is something is being imposed upon me and I need to resist that. So just like someone physically pushing you, you're going to push back. Instead of looking at it that way, if we can frame the change or the project or the initiative as an adventure that we're all engaged in, something positive that we're collaborating and creating together for the future, then people tend to see it in a different light, see it in a different way, and get excited about the engagement rather than pushing back, which is what we want. So 3 key areas that we can look at that are very important. The first being compliance with management. The second being identification with management beliefs. And the third, personal interest and satisfaction. So compliance with management, are we working together with management? Do we have good leadership and do we have buy-in? Identification with management beliefs. First of all, we have to have beliefs being bestowed from management. We have to have strong leadership. The actions of leadership has to reflect what they're saying. So what they say is what they do, and there needs to be congruency across that. And then people have to have a reason, the what's in it for me, the personal interest. If I don't care about what you're doing, and if it doesn't impact me in some way, shape, or form that matters to me, then why should I get involved, and why should I help you out in any way, shape, or form? Now, some forms of readiness that we should definitely include in any type of assessment, or I guess things that we want to watch out for, just as, if a patient comes into a doctor's office and they're looking for ailments or indications of something that's bad, these would be some things that we would commonly want to check. So the high blood pressure, you have a rash on your skin, some type of reaction to your environment, some type of breakdown in your system. Well, these would be breakdown concerns for us. So let's look at these forms of readiness. Overt forms of readiness: individuals express their discontent with change. Secondly, individuals criticize the change before they know what it's about. I mean, you can read through these on your own, but I just want to go through them quickly because they're all important. Individuals take specific, often covert actions to stop change. They behave favorably towards change sometimes, but then disapprove it later. They may change their views and minds frequently throughout the project. Individuals quickly agree with change sometimes, but then develop resistance to it later again. They may refuse to accept the need for the change, and that a changed state is necessary or imminent, so they just kind of push back and deny it altogether. They may ask for more information and then have difficulty understanding the information they're receiving. So this is something we would need to assess, right? When we're sending out communication on different platforms, are you able to engage and assess whether people understand and are working with and have buy-in in the information? Individuals may remain silent and not air their views, and sometimes the people that we need the most, the people that have the best ideas and the people that could persuade a lot of other people to come on board, are the ones that are quiet for different reasons. They may be introverted. They may simply be reluctant to get involved because the last time they did, it didn't work out well. So fair enough. Let's move on to the next slide then. So some key areas here then. Gaining commitment to change is critical to success. We know that. There was something in particular that I wanted to mention there. Yes. People support what they help to create. This is part of human nature, but it's critical to us. If it's true that people support what they help to create, then how are we going to get them involved? Now, it would be easy for us to just run projects without any community involvement, without any stakeholder involvement, from planning through to implementation. We'd probably be able to do it quicker, we'd probably be able to do it cheaper, but the truth of the matter is we would lack buy-in, we wouldn't give people what they really need, and more often than not our projects would fail, which is why we often see project failure rates of upwards of 70% depending on the industry that you're in. So we need to get people engaged, and we know that if they feel like they helped created what the project is all about, the buy-in, and not just the buy-in, but the psychological ownership and the willingness of them to actually advertise for us and to get other people involved increases tenfold. So the aim should therefore be to get people as involved as we possibly can, and to facilitate that somehow. So Facilitate engagement, give people decision-making authority and the freedom to co-create change. How can we do that? So selecting the right readiness tool, another consideration here. This is easier said than done. If you look out to organizations around the world today, there are many readiness assessment tools that are available, from as simple as an app that you can buy for an iPhone that maybe give you 4 or 5 questions that you can ask and then provide some type of output or assessment, to some pretty complex assessment tools that may require consulting that come from some of our high-end consulting firms. The question is, do you have the right assessment tool? Is it what you need for the context within which you're working and for the project or initiative that you're working on? And there's 3 key areas that I suggest you ask questions in. One is, does your assessment tool help you to deal with attitudes of the people that you're working with? 2, does it assess the conditions and the context within which you're working? And 3, the resources. Now combined, these 3 areas should enable us and not constrain us, so we need to go through each area. So first of all, dealing with attitudes. Now we've already mentioned this. This is where we're getting into the human nature side of things. Any project is meant to, at the end of the day, it enables people in some way, shape, or form. We're going to give them products, we're going to give them services, we're going to give them new processes, we're going to give them some type of new tool. So we need to get people involved. Now their beliefs, their thoughts, their attitudes can often hinder our ability to get them engaged through planning, get them engaged through execution and implementation, and get them engaged and get their buy-in to actually use what we create. So we need to be able to assess these things early on and get them involved as quickly as possible. So do we have a clear alignment between our vision, our goals, our objectives, and the attitudes and beliefs of the people that we're working with? In addition to that, who holds the power, another good question, to support or block the change as we move forward? And who holds visible, legitimate power that we may need to get as involved as we can, as early on as we can? Conditions and context, again, whatever tool we're using has to actually enable us to assess the context within which you work. So it doesn't matter where I've used a tool on a project that I've worked on, whether it's been in Spain or Japan or North America, you need a tool that's going to enable you to assess your conditions in your context, and it has to be realistic. So can you do that? And then some key questions here. Do you have the necessary, or will you be able to get the necessary results from the tool? Do you have quantified and articulated objectives? What supporting legislation, policy, strategies do you already have in place within the organization? Another good question which people often neglect to ask is what or how much change is already going on within the organization, and is it too much change to even deal with a new initiative? Resources, pretty standard question. Do we have the right resources? Do we have the skill sets we need? Do we have the resources we need when we need them in order to move forward? I would add to this, do you have organizational process assets, and how mature are they? So organizational process assets I'd be concerned about here would be things like project management processes, change management processes, disaster recovery processes, quality assurance processes, configuration management processes, any and all of the above. When we have effective processes in place that are being used, we have tools and templates that are in place that are being used, and when these things are relatively mature, it provides a lot of support to enable us in our project and in our change initiative, not just throughout the process or the life cycle of the project, but it also provides the support and the infrastructure to support our work after the project is closed.